In the cool morning mist that clung to the fields of Austerlitz, a solitary figure gazed upon the vast expanse where destiny unfolded like an unwritten scroll. His name echoed through the corridors of history like a thunderous drumbeat. Napoleon Bonaparte, a man whose ambition painted the map of Europe with strokes of conquest. As the first light of dawn kissed the horizon, Napoleon stood atop a ridge, a silhouette against the canvas of war. His eyes, keen and unwavering, surveyed the mosaic of regiments and cannons sprawled across the terrain. A sea of blue-coated soldiers awaited his command, their breath visible in the crisp winter air. Austerlitz, the stage for the impending drama, lay beneath him like a chessboard, and the pieces were set for a game that would resonate through the ages. Welcome to Untangled History. Welcome to the Napoleonic Wars. To get a good understanding about the circumstances in which the Napoleonic War took place, it is good to take a look at Europe during this time. Before the Napoleonic Wars, Europe was a continent characterized by a complex web of monarchies, empires, and principalities. The late 18th century was marked by a prevailing feudal system, where power was concentrated in the hands of monarchs and aristocrats. Many European nations were ruled by absolute monarchs who wielded significant authority over their realms. Monarchs like Louis XVIII of France, Maria Theresa of Austria, and Frederick II of Prussia exemplified the absolute power vested in the crown. Society was stratified into distinct classes, with the nobility enjoying privileges and land ownership. The majority of the population, however, comprised peasants who worked the land and were subject to the authority of the nobility. The Enlightenment, a philosophical movement that emphasized reason, science, and individual rights, gained traction in the 18th century. Thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu challenged traditional notions of authority and influenced the intellectual climate. The agricultural revolution had initiated changes in farming practices, leading to increased food production and population growth. Additionally, the rise of mercantilism saw nations competing for overseas colonies to secure resources and wealth. Europe was fraught with political rivalries and diplomatic tensions. The balance of power was a crucial concept as nations sought to prevent any single state from becoming too dominant, leading to a delicate equilibrium. In essence, the period preceding the Napoleonic Wars was characterized by a dynamic interplay of political, social, and economic forces. The seeds of change were sown, and the events that followed would ultimately redefine the face of Europe. Within the chaos of revolutions, wars, and conflict, arose a man from Corsica that would change Europe for good. Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power in France is a fascinating tale of military prowess, political acumen, and the volatile backdrop of the French Revolution. The French Revolution led to political turbulence, including the execution of King Louis XVIII and the establishment of the First French Republic. The revolutionary government faced internal conflicts, economic challenges, and external threats from European monarchies opposed to the revolutionary ideals. Napoleon's career began in the military during the French Revolution. His brilliant strategies and victories in key battles garnered him significant recognition and acclaim. His military successes elevated him to the status of a national hero. In 1799, the political landscape of France was characterized by instability, with the Directory struggling to maintain control. Seizing the opportunity, Napoleon, along with his political allies, orchestrated a coup d'état on 18 Brumaire on November 9, 1799. This event marked the end of the Directory and the establishment of the consulate. Napoleon became the first consul of France, effectively the head of government. In this role, he implemented political and economic reforms, consolidating power in his hands. He sought to stabilize the nation, address economic issues, and restore order after the chaos of the Revolution. Napoleon's political influence extended to constitutional changes. In 1800, he negotiated the Concordat with the Catholic Church, mending relations and stabilizing the religious landscape. Additionally, he promulgated the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system that influenced laws in many countries. The Napoleonic Code reflected Enlightenment ideals and principles that emerged during the French Revolution. It emphasized equality before the law, individual rights, and the protection of private property. The Code rejected feudal privileges and aimed to create a legal system accessible to all citizens. However, Napoleon's ambitions were not limited to reforming France. He also had a vision for expanding the French Empire and had the ambition to dominate all of Europe in order to extend the revolution beyond the French borders. This initiated a period of war for the whole of Europe, during which Napoleon and his army marched through Europe between 1803 and 1815 to realize his ambition. These wars are now known as the Napoleonic Wars. To get a good idea of the Napoleonic Wars, it is good to first look at how battles were fought during this time. The warfare during this time was characterized by a combination of traditional military tactics and innovative strategies that set the stage for modern warfare. The backbone of Napoleonic armies was the line infantry, organized in long linear formations. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, presenting a solid front to the enemy. This allowed for disciplined volleys of musket fire, creating a wall of lead capable of devastating enemy formations. Artillery played a crucial role, with cannons being strategically placed to support infantry movements. Cannons were used not only for direct fire, but also for creating gaps in enemy lines, disrupting formations and causing panic. Cavalry, armed with sabers and pistols, were often used to exploit weaknesses in the enemy line after infantry engagements. The shock value of a well-timed cavalry charge could break enemy morale and lead to a rout. Communication during the Napoleonic Wars was slow and relied on traditional means such as messengers on horseback. This limitation made coordination between different units challenging, and commanders had to rely on their subordinates' initiative and judgment. Both sides heavily relied on espionage to gather information about enemy movements and plans. Spies played a crucial role in providing commanders with critical intelligence, influencing strategic decisions and battle outcomes. Now the stage is set. Let's take a closer look at the biggest conflicts that occurred within the period of the Napoleonic Wars, starting with the War of the Third Coalition. The War of the Third Coalition, fought in 1805, was a significant conflict during the Napoleonic Wars. The key parties involved were the French Empire, led by Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, and the Third Coalition, a coalition of nations formed in opposition to Napoleon's expansionist ambitions. The Third Coalition was a coalition of European powers united against the perceived threat posed by Napoleon's increasing influence. The main members of the coalition included the United Kingdom, Russia, Austria, and Sweden, along with smaller German states. Napoleon's aggressive policies and territorial ambitions in Europe alarmed neighboring nations. His desire for dominance and the imposition of the continental system, a blockade against British trade, prompted resistance. The Battle of Austerlitz, fought on December 2, 1805, is often hailed as one of Napoleon Bonaparte's most brilliant victories during the War of the Third Coalition. It took place near the town of Austerlitz in the Austrian Empire. The conflict involved the French army, commanded by Napoleon, facing off against the Russian and Austrian forces led by Tsar Alexander I and Holy Roman Emperor Francis II. One of Napoleon's key strategies at Austerlitz was to deceive the Allies about the true strength and intentions of his forces. He purposefully withdrew his troops, creating a fake sign of vulnerability that lured the Allies into a false sense of confidence. Austerlitz presented a terrain with a low plateau in the center, surrounded by gently rolling landscapes. Recognizing the advantageous position, Napoleon strategically positioned his forces on the high ground. This allowed him to observe the movements of the Allies while concealing his own. The morning of the battle was shrouded in dense fog, providing cover for Napoleon's strategic repositioning. When the fog lifted around noon, it revealed the French forces poised on the plateau, catching the Allies off guard and nullifying their numerical superiority. Napoleon engaged in diversionary tactics to distract and misdirect the Allied forces. He encouraged the Allies to concentrate their efforts on the French right flank, creating a diversion while planning a decisive strike on their weakened left flank. The Allies committed a critical error by extending their lines to the vulnerable low ground. Napoleon astutely recognized this mistake and capitalized on it by launching a devastating counterattack from the elevated position. The French forces, renowned for their discipline and speed, executed Napoleon's commands with precision. The speed and coordination of the French maneuvers caught the Allies off guard, preventing them from effectively responding to the changing dynamics of the battle. The turning point of the battle came when Napoleon seized the moment to launch a powerful counterattack from the plateau. The French forces, inspired by their charismatic leader, overwhelmed the Allies with a combination of artillery, cavalry charges, and infantry assaults. The culmination of these strategic elements resulted in a resounding victory for Napoleon at Austerlitz. The battle showcased not only his military genius, but also his ability to adapt to changing circumstances, exploit enemy weaknesses, and employ deceptive tactics to achieve success on the battlefield. The Battle of Austerlitz further solidified Napoleon's reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. The defeat at Austerlitz compelled the Allies to sue for peace, resulting in the signing of the Treaty of Pressburg later in December 1805. Austria ceded significant territories to the French and withdrew from the war. The consequences of Austerlitz also contributed to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor Francis II abdicated, and the empire was officially dissolved in 1806. But with this victory, Napoleon's thirst for expansion wasn't over. The War of the Fourth Coalition unfolded between 1806 and 1807, constituting a significant chapter within the broader context of the Napoleonic Wars. The central actors were the French Empire, under the command of Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, and the Fourth Coalition, a coalition of European powers formed in response to Napoleon's expansionist endeavors. Napoleon's relentless pursuit of territorial dominance and strategic control in Europe had led to concerns among neighboring nations, ultimately giving rise to the Fourth Coalition. Key members of this coalition included Prussia, Russia, Saxony, and Sweden, with Britain offering financial and naval support. The primary motivations behind the war were rooted in Napoleon's ambitions to secure French dominance and counter British influence. Tensions escalated, particularly with Prussia, due to territorial disputes and its alignment with Russia against French interests. The war unfolded in a series of campaigns and battles. The French swiftly moved against Prussia, achieving a decisive victory at the Battle of Jena Auerstedt in October 1806. Subsequent campaigns on the Russian front, including the Battle of Eylau in February 1807, highlighted the brutality and inconclusiveness of certain engagements. The conflict reached its resolution with the signing of the Treaty of Tilsit in July 1807. In separate agreements with Russia and Prussia, Napoleon solidified French dominance. Territorial changes ensued, significantly weakening Prussia and establishing a Franco-Russian alliance. Consequently, the War of the Fourth Coalition reinforced Napoleon's supremacy in Europe. The defeat of the coalition underscored the effectiveness of Napoleon's military strategies and showcased the challenges faced by coalitions in countering the French forces. This period marked a continued reshaping of the European geopolitical landscape under Napoleon's influence. After another victory over Allied forces, Napoleon turned his view to the Iberian Peninsula. The Peninsular War was fought between 1808 and 1814. The key parties involved were the French Empire, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, and a coalition of Spanish, Portuguese, and British forces opposing French occupation. Napoleon sought to control the Iberian Peninsula to secure French dominance, weaken British influence, and enforce policies such as the Continental System. The conflict began with the Dos de Mayo uprising in Madrid in 1808, reflecting popular resistance against French rule and sparking widespread opposition in Spain and Portugal. The Siege of Saragossa became a symbol of Spanish resistance, where the city's defenders displayed remarkable tenacity against French forces. Arthur Wellesley, later the Duke of Wellington, assumed command of British forces and conducted strategic campaigns, including the battles of Talavera in 1809, Busaco in 1810, and Fuentes de Honoro, gradually pushing back the French. A distinctive aspect of the Peninsular War was the widespread use of guerrilla warfare by Spanish and Portuguese irregular forces. Operating in small mobile units, these guerrillas harassed French supply lines and disrupted communications. Wellington's successes, coupled with persistent guerrilla warfare and local determination, weakened the French position. The gradual withdrawal of French forces from the peninsula occurred due to strategic and logistical challenges, compelling the French to abandon their occupation. The Peninsular War concluded with the Treaty of Paris in 1814, formalizing the end of hostilities between France and the Allies. The war had a lasting impact on the Iberian Peninsula and the broader Napoleonic Wars, showcasing the effectiveness of guerrilla warfare and marking a turning point in Napoleon's fortunes. During the Peninsular War, the War of the Fifth Coalition unfolded in 1809 as part of the larger Napoleonic Wars, involving a coalition of European powers determined to curb French expansionism. The primary members of the coalition included Austria, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Portugal. Austria, having suffered previous defeats at the hands of Napoleon, sought to regain lost territories and challenge French influence. The United Kingdom, Spain, and Portugal, each with its own strategic interests, joined the coalition in opposition to French expansion. The campaign commenced with Austrian forces launching an offensive in April 1809, hoping to capitalize on perceived weaknesses in the French position. The conflict witnessed significant battles, including the Battle of Aspern-Essling in May 1809, where the Austrian Archduke Charles achieved a rare tactical victory against Napoleon, though it proved to be short-lived. The decisive Battle of Wagram in July 1809 marked a turning point in the war. Napoleon, with superior strategic maneuvering and coordinated military tactics, secured a decisive victory over the Austrians. The outcome led to the signing of the Treaty of Schönbrunn in October 1809, wherein Austria ceded additional territories to France and its allies. The consequences of the War of the Fifth Coalition were multifaceted. It solidified Napoleon's dominance in Europe, highlighted his military prowess, and further reshaped the geopolitical landscape. The Austrian defeat prompted internal reforms and adjustments, setting the stage for subsequent developments in European affairs. While the War of the Fifth Coalition did not result in a complete overturning of the existing order, it underscored the challenges faced by coalitions in countering Napoleon's military strategies. The invasion of Russia by France in 1812 marked a pivotal and ultimately disastrous campaign during the Napoleonic Wars. Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, driven by his grand vision of European dominance and frustrated by the Russian refusal to adhere to the continental system, an economic blockade against British trade, launched a massive military expedition into Russia. The campaign commenced in June 1812, with the French army crossing the Niemen River into Russian territory. Napoleon's forces, numbering around 600,000 soldiers from various European nations, aimed to force Tsar Alexander I to comply with French demands and bring Russia under Napoleon's sphere of influence. The early stages of the invasion saw some successes for the French, including the capture of key cities such as Smolensk. However, the Russian strategy of scorched earth tactics, coupled with the vastness of the Russian landscape, posed significant challenges for the invading army. The Russian forces, led by Marshal Mikhail Kutuzov, strategically retreated and avoided direct confrontations. As the French advanced deeper into Russia, they faced logistical difficulties, harsh weather conditions, and diminishing supplies. The Battle of Borodino in September 1812, fought near Moscow, was one of the bloodiest battles in history. While the French emerged victorious, the high casualties and the inability to decisively defeat the Russian army proved costly for Napoleon. The total casualties for both armies in the Battle of Borodino are often cited as exceeding 70,000 to 80,000 soldiers. In a strategic move, the Russians abandoned Moscow, leaving it to be occupied by the French. However, the occupation was short-lived, as a devastating fire engulfed the city in flames. Facing the harsh Russian winter, dwindling supplies, and increasing opposition, Napoleon decided to undertake the infamous retreat from Moscow in October 1812. The retreat became a harrowing ordeal for the French army. Harsh winter conditions, lack of provisions, and relentless attacks by Russian forces and partisan groups decimated the French ranks. By the time the remnants of the army crossed the Berezina River in November 1812, their numbers had dwindled significantly. The catastrophic failure of the Russian campaign proved to be a turning point in the Napoleonic Wars. The once mighty French army suffered immense losses, with estimates suggesting that only a fraction of the initial force survived. The retreat from Russia marked a significant dent in Napoleon's military reputation and signaled the beginning of a decline in his fortunes. The invasion of Russia in 1812 remains a cautionary tale in military history, illustrating the perils of overambitious campaigns, logistical challenges, and underestimating the resilience of the opponent and the harshness of the environment. The disastrous campaign had far-reaching consequences, contributing to the eventual downfall of Napoleon's empire. The War of the Sixth Coalition, which transpired from 1812 to 1814, marked a significant phase within the broader context of the Napoleonic Wars. The origins of the coalition can be traced to the aftermath of Napoleon's ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. The catastrophic losses suffered by the French army and the ensuing retreat from Moscow had weakened Napoleon's position. Sensing an opportunity to challenge French hegemony, several European nations, including Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden, formed the Sixth Coalition in 1813. The campaign unfolded on multiple fronts across Europe, and the coalition forces, inspired by a shared desire to curb Napoleon's dominance, engaged in a series of decisive battles. Notable among these was the Battle of Leipzig in October 1813, often referred to as the Battle of Nations, where the coalition achieved a significant victory over Napoleon. The defeat at Leipzig marked a turning point as it forced Napoleon to retreat westward. The coalition's forces continued to advance, pushing Napoleon's armies back into France. The Peninsular War in Spain also intensified during this period, contributing to the overall pressure on French forces. The Treaty of Fontainebleau in April 1814 marked the formal conclusion of the War of the Sixth Coalition. The treaty forced Napoleon to abdicate the throne, and he was exiled to the island of Elba. The coalition achieved its primary goal of defeating Napoleon and dismantling the French Empire, leading to significant territorial adjustments in Europe. The War of the Sixth Coalition had far-reaching consequences, reshaping the political landscape of Europe. The Congress of Vienna, convened in 1814 till 1815 to redraw borders and establish a new balance of power. But with his banishing to Elba, Napoleon wasn't yet defeated. His escape from the island of Elba in 1815 marked a dramatic and audacious return to power, giving rise to the period known as the 100 Days. Following his defeat in 1814 and the signing of the Treaty of Fontainebleau, Napoleon was exiled to the small Mediterranean island of Elba, where he was granted sovereignty over the island and allowed to retain a personal guard. However, Napoleon's ambitious and restless nature led him to contemplate a return to the European stage. Taking advantage of political discontent in France and the wavering loyalty of elements within the French military, Napoleon seized the opportunity to escape from Elba on February 26, 1815. With a small group of loyal followers, including several members of his imperial guard, Napoleon sailed from Elba to France. His arrival on the French mainland, near Antibes, on March 1, 1815, marked the beginning of a daring and rapid march toward Paris. Along the way, Napoleon's charisma and reputation, combined with the grievances of some sections of the French population and military, contributed to his growing support. The French military, initially sent to apprehend Napoleon, instead rallied behind him. Upon reaching Paris on March 20, 1815, Napoleon was met with a mix of enthusiasm and uncertainty. His return prompted a wave of excitement among those who remembered the glory of the Napoleonic era, but it also raised concerns among those who sought stability after the years of conflict. Napoleon's return to power was solidified with the issuance of the Additional Act on April 22, 1815, which reinstated him as Emperor of the French. This marked the beginning of the 100 Days, a period of intense activity during which Napoleon sought to re-establish his authority and revive his vision of a European empire. However, his ambitions were short-lived. The War of the Seventh Coalition was triggered by the European powers' determination to quell Napoleon's resurgence. The climactic Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815, resulted in Napoleon's definitive defeat at the hands of the Duke of Wellington and Field Marshal Blücher. Following the defeat at Waterloo, Napoleon abdicated for the second time on June 22, 1815. This time, he was sent into permanent exile on the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the remaining years of his life until his death in 1821. As we conclude this journey through the tumultuous era of the Napoleonic Wars, we are reminded of the sweeping landscapes, the thundering cannons, and the indomitable spirit of those who shaped the course of history. The Napoleonic Wars, a symphony of conflict that echoed across continents, saw the rise and fall of empires, the clash of ideologies, and the inexorable march of armies. From the frozen expanses of Russia to the sun-drenched fields of Austerlitz, the drama unfolded with each strategic maneuver and every valiant charge. The legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte, a military genius and charismatic leader, left an indelible mark on the pages of history. Yet, as we reflect on the battles, the alliances, and the intricate dance of diplomacy, we also recognize the resilience of nations, the triumph of human spirit, and the eventual pursuit of peace. The Napoleonic Wars were a crucible that tested the mettle of leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike, shaping the destiny of Europe in ways that continue to reverberate. As we bid adieu to this captivating exploration of an era defined by conflict and conquest, let us not forget the lessons learned from the rise and fall of empires. The Napoleonic Wars stand as a testament to the relentless pursuit of power, the fragility of alliances, and the enduring quest for a balance that ensures a lasting peace. Join us in our future explorations as we untangle the tapestry of history, delving into the triumphs and tribulations that have shaped the world we inhabit today. Until then, may the echoes of the Napoleonic era continue to resonate, reminding us of the complexities of human ambition and the enduring quest for a world free from the shackles of war.